Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Always excited to be back.
So today we're really pushing the boundaries of what's possible with human life.
Yeah, I mean, who hasn't thought about, you know,
Yeah.
what it'd be like to just keep living and living?
Exactly, to live way beyond what we consider a normal lifespan.
Exactly.
And to guide us through this exploration, we're going to be looking at excerpts
Right.
from a fictional work called The Man Who Stopped Aging.
Ooh, that sounds interesting already.
Oh, it's a fascinating read, really gets you thinking.
Hmm.
But this isn't just some
Right.
immortality fantasy,
Yeah. Right, yeah.
It really dives into the nitty-gritty of what it means
Yeah. Yeah.
to live for centuries, how it affects your relationships.
Right, like the psychology of it
Yeah,
all.
the psychology, your sense of self, even your purpose.
Yeah, what's the point of it all?
Right. What does it even mean to have a purpose
Right.
when you could potentially live forever?
Exactly, yeah.
So the story centers around this character named William, and he basically stops aging due to this experimental treatment.
Wow, so like he's immortal.
Well, it's not explicitly stated if he's immortal,
Okay.
but he's definitely stopped aging, at least outwardly.
So he could theoretically live for hundreds of years.
Potentially, yeah.
Hmm.
That's wild. And to make things even more mind-boggling,
Oh?
the world William lives in has this technology called neural digitization.
Neural digitization.
Uh-huh.
What is that? Like uploading your mind?
Exactly. It's like creating a digital backup of your consciousness.
Whoa, that's like next level stuff.
Right. And the story explores all these philosophical questions about
Yeah.
what that means for identity, for the soul, for what it means to be human.
It really makes you think, like, what is life even at that point?
Right. Is it the physical body or is it the digital copy of your mind?
Right.
And if you could back yourself up, would it really be you or just a copy?
And who gets to decide which one is the real you?
Exactly. All these ethical questions just start popping up.
Yeah, heavy stuff.
So the story captures William wrestling with all these big questions.
Right.
On one hand, he's excited about the possibilities, all that extra time.
I mean, who wouldn't be?
Right. Think about all the things you could do, the places you could go.
Yeah, you could learn everything, master every skill,
Exactly.
see the world change over centuries.
But there's this underlying fear, too.
Okay.
He wonders, is he losing his humanity in this pursuit of extended life?
Right. Is there a cost to all this?
Yeah. Does living longer actually have value if you lose what makes you human?
That's a good point. Like, what's the point of living forever if you're not really living?
And there's this detail that really struck me.
Hmm.
William has this virtual version of his study.
Like a digital recreation.
Yeah, it's filled with digital books. He can even simulate sunsets.
Whoa, that's so interesting.
It's almost like he's trying to hold on to familiarity.
Yeah, like some kind of comfort.
Yeah, comfort in the face of all this drastic change.
Right, because even if you could live forever, there's still that human need for connection to the past.
Exactly. It shows how we crave those familiar comforts,
Yeah.
no matter how technologically advanced our lives become.
It's like that old saying, you can't escape your past.
Now, one of the most powerful aspects of the story is how it handles love and loss across time.
Oh, yeah, I can only imagine.
I mean, imagine outliving those you love.
That's got to be one of the hardest parts of a really long life.
And that's William's reality.
Wow.
The story doesn't shy away from the pain and the grief
Right.
of losing those closest to you.
It's like the ultimate test of resilience.
And what's interesting is that the story doesn't just tell you about these lost loves.
Huh.
It brings them to life, gives you these little details.
So you really feel their absence.
Yeah, like William's wife, Lena.
Okay.
She loved snacks.
Oh.
Always had to have them nearby.
I know some people like that.
Right. And then there's Sarah, his close friend.
Okay.
She was all about philosophy, always searching for deeper meaning.
So their personalities really shine through.
Yeah, you get a sense of who they were. And
Mhm.
William, even with all the tech at his disposal,
Right.
he finds solace in his memories of them.
Makes sense. Memories are powerful.
And he even creates these incredibly lifelike digital recreations.
Digital recreation?
Yeah, like holograms.
Wow, that's both amazing and kind of creepy.
It is, right?
Mm.
It makes you think about how technology might change how we grieve in the future.
For sure. Like, is that healthy? Is it a way to avoid dealing with grief?
All these ethical questions again.
Yeah, complicated stuff.
But it also underscores that even with all the tech in the world, that true connection
Right.
and the pain of loss,
Yeah,
those are deeply human experiences that technology can't fully replicate.
absolutely. Like, grief is a part of life.
And there's this really poignant moment where William remembers how he and Lena
Okay.
dealt with her cancer diagnosis.
Oh, wow.
They use humor, laugh their way through it. It shows how strong their bond was, even in the face of something so difficult.
Yeah, finding light in the darkness.
It's that mix of cutting-edge technology
Right.
and raw human emotion
Yeah.
that makes this story so compelling.
It reminds you that even in a world of potential immortality,
Right.
it's our relationships and how we adapt to life's challenges
Right.
that really define us as humans.
Absolutely. Well said.
I mean, you can't have a guy living for centuries without him
Right.
pondering the meaning of life.
Right. Like, what else are you going to do with all that time?
Exactly. So William's journey takes us through this evolution of his own purpose.
Okay, so how does it start?
Well, at first, he's all about those traditional markers of success.
Okay, like what?
Career, knowledge, achievement.
Usual suspects.
Yeah, he's driven to learn, to climb the ladder.
Right, make a name for himself.
But as time stretches on and on,
Things change.
things start to shift.
How so?
He begins to value human connection more.
Okay.
Personal growth, finding joy in those simple moments. Interesting shift.
It's like he realizes that all those external markers of success,
Yeah.
they don't really fulfill him in the way he thought they would.
Right, like it's not about the destination, it's the journey.
Exactly. And it makes you think, are we all so caught up in achieving success
Right.
that we miss out on the simple joys of just being alive?
That's a good point. Like, maybe we're also focused on the future that we forget to appreciate the now.
And William's story is a reminder to pause and appreciate what we have now. Those simple moments, those connections.
Right, be present.
And he doesn't just think about it, he puts it into action.
Okay.
He starts eating better, exercising regularly, even finds peace in just resting.
Wow, like a total lifestyle change.
Yeah, it's like he's embracing a whole new way of being.
Right, aligning his actions with his new values.
And his walks, they become this important ritual.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Especially after Sarah passes away. It's like he's processing his grief, connecting with nature, finding solace in the rhythm of his own steps.
It's almost symbolic, like he's walking through his grief.
Yeah, it's this beautiful image of resilience.
Right, keep moving forward even when it's tough.
Now, remember we talked about that blurred line between humans and technology?
Oh yeah, with the neural digitization and all that.
Well, the story takes that even further.
Okay, how so?
It introduces these AI personal assistants,
AI assistants?
but these aren't your typical Siri or Alexa.
Right.
They have advanced emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence, wow.
Yeah, they can understand and respond to human emotions in a really sophisticated way.
So they're more like companions than just tools.
Exactly. They can be confidants, advisors, even friends.
That's fascinating.
And William, he's obviously hesitant at first.
Right, I mean, trusting a machine with your emotions is a big step.
But then he experiences this unexpected benefit.
What's that?
He feels truly understood and supported by this AI.
Really? By a machine?
Yeah, and with access to vast amounts of data, the AI can help him make smart decisions about his health, finances, everything.
So it's like having a super intelligent advisor.
But the story also dives into the potential downsides.
Yeah, there's got to be some.
What happens when we rely too heavily on AI for guidance and decision-making?
Right. What about our own intuition?
Do we lose our ability to think critically, to connect with other humans?
What about privacy, security, all those concerns?
All these important questions that we as a society need to grapple with.
Especially with AI developing so rapidly.
It makes you reconsider what it even means to be human.
Yeah, what sets us apart in a world where machines can think and feel?
Exactly, and it's a theme that runs throughout the story, this tension between embracing the power of technology and holding on to our values, what makes us uniquely human.
It's a delicate balance.
For sure, and I love how the story doesn't shy away from those complex questions.
That makes you think.
Yeah, it really gets under your skin.
So let's dig into that a bit more, because I'm curious,
Okay.
what are some of those specific values or qualities that William tries to hold on to?
That's a great question, and it leads us to another fascinating aspect of the story.
Okay, I'm listening.
William's passion for writing.
Writing.
Yeah, it's like this anchor for him
Interesting.
in this incredibly long life.
Right.
He uses writing to process his experiences, to
Okay.
ponder those big existential questions,
Yeah.
and to create meaning.
It's like he's finding purpose through storytelling.
Exactly, and we see this through his journal, filled with reflections on everything.
Oh, wow. So we get to peek into his mind.
Yeah, it's like a window into his thoughts, his struggles, his triumphs.
I bet that journal is massive after all those years.
It's described as this massive collection of notebooks.
Wow.
Filled with everything from his personal reflections to philosophical musings to observations about the world changing around him.
So it's like a historical record, too.
And what's beautiful is that it doesn't just stay private.
Okay.
His journal entries eventually become a book. Oh, wow.
Called The Garden of Life.
Nice title.
It's a reminder that our stories can transcend time.
Yeah, they can connect with others in ways we might never imagine.
Exactly, and it shows how William finds a way to connect even in his solitude.
So it's not just about leaving a record, it's about reaching out to others.
Exactly, and he's not just writing, he's actively seeking answers in literature and philosophy.
Okay.
He gets deep into the ideas of Albert Camus.
Yeah.
And that whole concept of the absurdity of existence.
Right, we talked about that a bit earlier.
And it's like he's using these intellectual pursuits to make sense of his own life.
Right, finding frameworks to help him understand.
Especially in a world where those traditional markers of time don't really apply anymore.
So, like, if you're not bound by a typical lifespan, how do you even measure a life?
Exactly. What gives life meaning when you could potentially live forever?
Deep question.
And through all this exploration, William starts to find a kind of peace with the absurdity of life.
Which is something I think we can all relate to in some way.
Right, like life doesn't always make sense.
And speaking of finding peace...
Okay, this sounds interesting.
There's this unexpected twist in the story.
A twist?
Penelope, a woman from William's past, comes back into his life.
Oh, so like a second chance romance?
It's not exactly like that.
Okay.
But it does bring this whole new dimension to the story.
I'm intrigued.
What's fascinating is the joy and humor they find together.
Really? Even after all William has been through?
Yeah, they've both reached this point where they accept life's absurdities.
Right.
And they find happiness in those simple moments.
That's sweet, finding love and laughter later in life.
And there's this great contrast between William's previous marriage, which was full of tension and conflict, and his relationship with Penelope.
So it's like he's learned from his past.
Exactly. It highlights the importance of finding someone who truly gets you.
Yeah, somebody who accepts you for who you are, flaws and all.
And there's this running theme of forgetfulness.
Forgetfulness?
Yeah, they both have moments where their memories slip.
That's kind of endearing.
It brings this touch of humor and relatability to their interactions.
Right, like they're not these perfect beings, they're human.
Exactly. They're just two people trying to figure things out and find joy in the everyday.
So it's not about achieving some grand ideal of love.
Right.
It's about embracing the messiness and imperfections.
And finding those moments of connection.
Right.
Even in the midst of all life's absurdities.
Sounds like a powerful message.
And it's what William's story is really all about. It's about finding a way to live a life that's meaningful and fulfilling, however long it might be.
And that's a question we all grapple with, right?
Absolutely. What does it mean to live a good life?
Especially in a world where technology is constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
And that's where the story gets really interesting, because it doesn't shy away from the potential downsides of extreme longevity either.
Right, like there's got to be some trade-offs.
Exactly, and the story hits at these treatments that William receives.
Treatments.
They're kind of mysterious.
Okay.
But it's clear they've had a massive impact on his life.
So like how do they work?
We get glimpses.
Okay.
We know they've stopped his aging.
Right.
And that there's some genetic manipulation involved.
Genetic manipulation.
And maybe even neural digitization.
Wow, that's getting into some serious sci-fi territory.
It is, and it's like the author is prompting us to think about how far we might go with these future medical advancements.
Yeah, like where do we draw the line?
But also the ethical implications.
Right, like are we playing God?
Exactly. And the story doesn't provide all the answers, but it raises these important questions.
Because let's be real, living for centuries throws up a ton of questions.
Oh, yeah, a whole can of worms.
Like what about the social and economic impact?
Exactly. Would these treatments be available to everyone?
Or would it create even bigger inequalities?
Right. And what about resources, overpopulation?
And are we even emotionally equipped to handle that kind of lifespan?
Right. Could we cope with the grief, the loss, the constant change?
These are huge questions.
And the story makes us confront them.
Which is what good sci-fi should do, right?
It forces us to think about the potential consequences,
Yeah.
both good and bad.
Of our technological advancements.
And to approach these things responsibly.
Right, with a focus on the well-being of humanity.
And one thing that I found really interesting is that even with these treatments that have stopped his aging, William still worries about getting older.
Really?
But why? There's this moment where he wonders if his body is actually aging normally, even though he looks and feels young.
So, like, is time still catching up to him in some way?
He's worried that it might be.
That's a fascinating thought. Like, even if we conquer aging physically,
Yeah.
are we still subject to the passage of time on some deeper level?
It's like he can't escape that fundamental human experience of time passing.
Right, and it makes you think, what does aging even mean?
Yeah, is it just biological or is it something more?
Is it about our experiences, our wisdom, how we perceive the world?
Exactly. It's a question that gets even more complex when you throw in the possibility of extreme longevity.
And it's not just William grappling with these questions, right?
No, the story zooms out to look at the societal stuff too.
Oh, I like that. So it's not just a personal journey.
There's the scene where he and Lena are watching the news.
Okay.
And they're struck by how fast the world is changing around them.
Makes sense, especially with him living so long.
Yeah, he witnesses wars, political upheavals, technological revolutions.
Wow, like a front row seat to history.
He becomes this living archive of human history.
And that must give him a unique perspective.
Oh, absolutely.
On how we change and how we stay the same.
He sees the rise and fall of empires, the changing tides of beliefs.
Right.
And how humans are capable of both incredible compassion and devastating destruction.
It's like the duality of human nature.
Exactly. And it's a lot to process.
Oh, I bet.
But it also gives him this deep appreciation for life, for the resilience of the human spirit.
So he's not just observing, he's actively trying to understand.
Yeah, to find meaning in the chaos.
And it seems like that understanding shapes how he lives.
It does. It influences his choices, how he treats others.
Right. Like, what's the point of living a long life if you're not making it a good one?
And that leads us to this big theme of legacy.
Legacy.
Which is something William thinks about a lot as he gets older.
Yeah, if you've got centuries to live.
You have to wonder what mark you'll leave on the world.
Especially with his unique perspective.
Right. He's not just thinking about his immediate family and friends.
Okay.
He's considering generations to come.
Wow. That's a heavy responsibility.
And the story explores this theme in really interesting ways.
So how does he approach it?
Well, we see him grapple with the question of how do you make a positive impact when you have so much time?
Right. Is it about achieving great things or is it something more personal?
And that's the question the story asks us to consider as well.
A lot to think about.
And it's not just about what we accomplish, but about the connections we make, the love we share, and the ripple effects of our actions.
So it's about living a life that's meaningful and impactful in all those ways.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that William continues to wrestle with as his journey unfolds.
Can't wait to see where it goes from here.
Me too. There's so much more to unpack in this story.
I'm ready for the next deep dive.
Me too. So let's take a break and come back for part 2.
Sounds good to me. So we left off talking about William's legacy and all the things he's thinking about as he lives this incredibly long life.
Right. And it's like his story is this tapestry, woven with all these threads of connection and resilience and that constant search for meaning.
And that search for meaning doesn't stop, even as he confronts his own mortality.
Because even with the stopped aging thing, he knows time is still passing and that his journey will eventually end.
That's a powerful realization, and the story doesn't shy away from it.
There's that moment where he's reflecting on death and says, nowadays one can survive anything except death.
It's a sobering reminder that no matter how long we live, we all have to face that finality.
But what's interesting is how William's view of death evolves over time.
Right, at first he's scared of it.
Yeah, almost repulsed by the thought of not existing.
But as he lives longer and experiences more loss, his understanding becomes more nuanced.
He doesn't necessarily welcome death, but he comes to accept it as a natural part of life.
And that acceptance is what frees him to really focus on the present moment.
To appreciate the beauty in everyday experiences and find joy in the simple things.
like a quiet evening with Penelope or a conversation with his sons.
A walk in nature.
He savors those moments and finds beauty in the everyday.
And it's through those simple moments that he starts to create a legacy that will outlive him.
A legacy of love, compassion, resilience, and that ongoing search for meaning.
You mentioned earlier how his long life lets him witness those big shifts in societal values and attitudes.
It's fascinating to think about how our values might change as we adapt to new tech and social norms.
What were some of the changes that really jumped out at you? What do they say about how humanity is evolving?
One of the most noticeable shifts is the increasing acceptance of diversity and individuality.
William grew up in a time that emphasized conformity, but as he lives longer, he sees society becoming more tolerant and accepting.
Of different lifestyles, beliefs, and identities.
It's a hopeful sign.
It shows that progress is possible, even if it's gradual, and we sometimes feel like we're taking steps backward.
There's also a growing awareness of our interconnectedness.
As William witnesses the environmental challenges facing the planet, he sees a movement towards sustainability.
People starting to understand that our actions have consequences that ripple out to future generations.
It's a reminder that our choices matter not just for ourselves, but for the well-being of the planet.
And for the future of humanity.
We're all in this together.
And there's a pretty interesting shift in attitudes toward death and mortality, too.
Yeah, earlier in the story, death is portrayed as something to be feared and avoided at all costs.
But as William lives longer, he begins to see it as a natural part of life. Something to approach with acceptance.
Even peace.
Like it's not something to be dreaded, but just a natural part of the cycle.
And that shift in perspective lets him appreciate the present moment more fully.
Live with more purpose.
It's a profound realization, and I think it's something many of us struggle with.
We're so focused on living longer that we forget to truly live in the now.
William's story is a good reminder that a good life isn't just about the quantity of years, but about the quality of those years.
It's about cherishing those everyday moments.
Nurturing our relationships.
Making choices that align with our values.
Speaking of choices, one of the most interesting parts of William's journey is his decision to embrace the philosophy of Albert Camus.
Especially the idea of the absurdity of existence.
What do you think draws him to that philosophy, and how does it impact his outlook?
I think it gets at the core of his search for meaning.
He's lived through so much,
witnessed incredible change.
Experienced profound love and devastating loss.
And he's wrestling with those big existential questions.
What is the meaning of life? What's our purpose?
How are we here?
And Camus offers a way to understand the inherent meaninglessness of existence.
There's no grand plan.
No divine purpose.
No ultimate answer to those questions.
Which can be a difficult pill to swallow.
Yeah, it can feel pretty bleak.
But for William, it's a source of liberation.
Because if there's no inherent meaning, then we have the freedom to create our own.
We choose our values.
Pursue our passions.
Find our own ways to make life meaningful.
It's a radical idea, but it works for William because it aligns with what he's experienced.
He knows life is unpredictable.
Often unfair.
And ultimately finite.
And by embracing the absurdity of it all, he finds a way to live with greater authenticity.
Intention.
And even joy.
It's like he's saying, okay, the universe might not care if I exist, but I'm going to make my existence matter.
I'm going to fill my life with love and purpose and connection, even if it's all meaningless in the grand scheme of things.
It's a powerful way to look at life.
It makes you think about how we approach our own lives.
Do we get bogged down by the search for inherent meaning?
Or do we embrace the freedom to create our own meaning?
And William's embrace of the absurd impacts his relationships too.
He's not so focused on finding the one or achieving some perfect idealized love.
Instead, he's more open to the messiness and imperfections of human connection.
He's not looking for perfection anymore.
He's learned to appreciate those fleeting moments of connection.
The shared laughter.
The unexpected acts of kindness.
The simple joy of being present with another human being.
And you can really see that in his relationship with Penelope.
It's not about grand gestures or romantic fantasies.
It's about the simple rhythm of their lives together.
The shared meals.
The silly jokes.
The comfort of just being in each other's presence.
They find joy in the mundane.
And they support each other through life's challenges.
It's a grounded and authentic relationship that feels both relatable and inspiring.
They're not striving for some unrealistic ideal.
They're just embracing life together.
With all its ups and downs.
And suggest that maybe true happiness isn't about finding the perfect person.
Or achieving some grand ambition.
Maybe it's about finding those moments of connection and meaning in the everyday.
Amidst all the absurdities of life,
Appreciating the simple things,
the connections we make,
the love we share.
even when life feels chaotic and unpredictable.
And William's story reminds us that those moments, those connections, are what truly matter in the end.
They're the threads that weave together our experiences, our relationships, and the legacy we leave behind.
And that brings us back to that idea of legacy, which seems to weigh heavily on William's mind.
How does he ultimately deal with the question of what he'll leave behind?
How does he reconcile living for so long with the knowledge that it will eventually end?
That's a question that takes on even greater significance for him because of his extended lifespan.
He's not just thinking about his impact on his immediate circle.
He's thinking about generations to come.
It's a big responsibility.
We've talked about his writing and his community involvement, but are there other ways he tries to shape his legacy?
Does he ever find peace with the idea that his time will run out?
Those are great questions.
And they lead us to some of the most poignant and revealing parts of William's story.
So let's explore those as we dive into the final part of our deep dive. It's amazing how William can see those huge societal changes, but he's also thinking about his own legacy. How do you live for centuries and then accept that it ends?
It's definitely something he wrestles with throughout the story. At first, he's almost obsessed with writing everything down. It's like he's trying to capture every single experience because he has the time. His journal becomes this massive collection of everything, almost like he's building his own museum of his life.
Makes sense, though. If you could live for centuries, wouldn't you want to remember it all? But does that change for him? Does he ever just live in the moment?
That's where Camus's idea of the absurd comes back in. It doesn't just affect how William sees meaning in relationships. It changes how he thinks about death. He starts seeing death as the ultimate absurdity. It just is.
So he stops fighting against the inevitable.
Exactly. He realizes that by focusing so much on legacy, he's missing out on actually living his life. There's a part where he's watching the sunrise, and he says it's a fleeting masterpiece meant to be savored, not possessed. That's when he changes. He goes from trying to control how he's remembered to just enjoying the moment.
That's a big change in how he sees things. It reminds me of how we get caught up thinking about the future or the past, and we forget to enjoy what's happening now.
Exactly. That's something we can all learn from William, even if we don't live for hundreds of years. He starts to appreciate the small things, like gardening or spending time with his grandkids or sitting on the porch watching the sunset with Penelope.
It's like he finally understands that those small moments are actually the most important. But he doesn't completely stop caring about his legacy, right?
No, he doesn't. He just redefines what legacy means to him. He starts to see his legacy as the impact he has on the people he loves. It's about love and kindness and wisdom.
So instead of statues and books, it's his family and friends who carry his legacy. It's a more personal kind of legacy.
It is, and something that lasts for generations.
Yeah.
There's a part where his great-granddaughter has to give a presentation at school about someone she admires. And guess who she picks?
William, right.
Yep. She talks about how he taught her to be curious, to appreciate simple things, and to never stop learning. It's clear that his influence reaches way beyond just the people he knew personally.
That's a really great example of how living a good life can affect so many others. It's not about some big monument. It's about those little things that make a difference.
And his long life lets him see those little things grow and change the people around him. It makes you wonder, if we all lived longer, would we be more careful about how our actions affect others?
It's an interesting thought. Maybe we would be more aware of how connected everything is.
Something to think about. But even if we don't live for centuries, we can still try to have a positive impact on the world.
William's story is a great reminder of that. So before we go, one last question. If you could talk to William after learning about his life, what would you ask him?
That's a hard one. But after going on this journey with him, I think I'd ask him, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to your younger self? What would you tell someone just starting their life?
That's a great question, because William's story isn't just about living a long time. It's about what it means to be human. It's about choices and relationships and how we leave our mark on the world.
It encourages us to think about our own lives and really appreciate the time we have.
So, to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into The Man Who Stopped Aging. I hope you found it as thought-provoking as we did. Until next time, keep exploring and keep asking questions.